Welcome back to our American History series. In the last episode, we saw how westward expansion and the question of slavery brought the United States to the brink of collapse. Today, we're diving into the most pivotal conflict in American history, the Civil War. This was not just a war between two sides, it was a struggle over the soul of the nation, where ideals, principles, and the future of millions were at stake. Join us as we explore how this brutal war began, the major battles that defined it, and the lasting impact it had on America's future. In 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected president, the southern states felt their way of life, especially slavery, was under threat. Lincoln had promised to halt the expansion of slavery into new territories, but he wasn't initially calling for its outright abolition. However, the South feared that if slavery could not grow, it would eventually die out, and with it, their economy and way of life. In response, Southern states began to secede from the Union, starting with South Carolina in December 1860. By early 1861, 7 states had formed the Confederate States of America, with Jefferson Davis as its president. These states firmly believed in states' rights, the right to govern themselves and decide on issues like slavery. But the Union, led by Lincoln, insisted that the United States must remain united. For Lincoln, the issue was not just about slavery but about the survival of the nation's democratic system. The Civil War officially began in April 1861 when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The Union garrison there surrendered after a 34-hour bombardment. What began as a war to preserve the Union soon became a battle over the very future of slavery and freedom in America. Both sides prepared for what they believed would be a short conflict, but they could not have foreseen the brutal and drawn-out war that was to come. The Union and the Confederacy were vastly different, not only in their goals but also in their resources. The North had a strong industrial base, extensive railroads, and a much larger population, which gave them an advantage in manpower and supplies. The South, on the other hand, relied on its agricultural economy, particularly cotton, and had a military tradition with seasoned leaders. Their advantage lay in fighting on familiar territory and the motivation to defend their homeland. The first major battle, known as the First Battle of Bull Run or Manassas, took place in July 1861. Union forces, confident of a quick victory, marched to confront the Confederates. However, they were met with fierce resistance, and what was supposed to be a swift end to the rebellion turned into a chaotic retreat for the Union. This early Confederate victory shattered any illusions that the war would be short or easy. Both sides began to dig in for a prolonged struggle. The Union planned to use its naval strength to blockade southern ports, cutting off supplies and trade, while attempting to gain control of the Mississippi River to split the Confederacy. Meanwhile, the Confederates focused on defending their territory, hoping that a series of victories might lead to European recognition and aid. By 1862, it became clear to Lincoln that preserving the Union alone was not enough. Slavery was at the heart of the conflict, and to win the war, he had to attack the South's economic and social foundation. In January 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all enslaved people in the Confederate States were to be freed. Though it did not immediately free all slaves, it was a turning point, transforming the war into a fight for freedom and ensuring that any chance of European intervention on behalf of the Confederacy vanished. Two of the most critical battles of the war took place between 1862 and 1863. The Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest single day in American history, with over 22,000 casualties. Although technically a draw, it halted the Confederate invasion of the North and gave Lincoln the confidence to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. A year later, in July 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg became the turning point of the war. For 3 days, Union and Confederate forces clashed in the small town in Pennsylvania. Over 50,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing, making it the bloodiest battle of the war. After a fierce struggle, the Union emerged victorious, dealing a devastating blow to General Robert E. Lee's army. Just a few months after the battle, Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address, one of the most iconic speeches in American history. In just a few short minutes, he redefined the purpose of the war, calling for a new birth of freedom and reminding the nation of its commitment to equality and democracy. Lincoln's words galvanized the Union cause, but the war was far from over. In 1864, Union leadership fell to General Ulysses S. Grant, who understood that victory would require total war. Under his command, the Union armies began to target not just Confederate forces but also the resources that sustained them. General William Tecumseh Sherman's infamous march to the sea laid waste to Georgia's railroads, crops, and factories, leaving a path of destruction and breaking the South's will to fight. After 4 long years, the Confederacy was exhausted. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Though skirmishes continued for a short time afterward, this marked the end of the Civil War. The Union had been preserved, and the long, painful process of healing could begin. But the nation's relief was short-lived. Just days after the war ended, President Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. His death was a tragic end to the conflict, and it left the country in mourning. Lincoln had not only preserved the Union but had redefined its values. His loss was felt deeply across the nation, North and South. The war may have ended, but the challenges of peace were only beginning. The Reconstruction era aimed to reintegrate the Southern states into the Union and secure rights for newly freed African Americans. The passage of the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, but the journey to true freedom and equality was far from complete. The Civil War remains the deadliest conflict in American history, with over 600,000 lives lost. Yet, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that strove for equality, freedom, and a united nation. The war's legacy lives on in the continuing struggles for civil rights and justice in America. Join us in our next episode as we explore the Reconstruction era, the challenges of rebuilding a divided nation, and the fight for civil rights that would continue for generations. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next episode.